Welcome to the tutorial on how to create this gorgeous daisy wildflower garden. Now you can, if you like, take this stencil and cut around each individual flower and little insect, or you can do like I'm going to do and create the whole piece. Now you can put this at the bottom of your sweater. I personally like to put it in the center, which is what I'm going to do here today. So I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and even, and you can do that by measuring the rows either side of your stencil, or of course you can use a ruler. So I'm just going to adhere it to the garment nice and securely, making sure there's no rolled edges. And we're ready to start. We're going to start here with a cute little mushroom. So the first thing I'm going to do is to thread onto my needle approximately a meter of any color yarn that you'd like to use for your stem of your mushroom. Now I would normally use an oatmeal color for this. However, I'm going to be going in with a sort of a gray color because the color of my sweater is kind of a beigey color. And I've just put on a good arm's length worth of yarn, so about a meter, and we're just going to go ahead and do a bit of a satin stitch. Now you'll notice there are a few holes here. I did originally think white was going to look nice, started it, and then thought, hang on a minute, all my daisies are going to be white, so I thought perhaps I need to unstitch it, and I thought maybe a nice grey would work well here. Now we're just going to keep here with the satin stitch, so I'm just going to go across and keep my stitches nice and even. You want to keep your yarn inside the lines of the outline of your drawing, which keeps things looking nice and smooth. So we're just going to go all the way to the top. And once we reach the top, we're just going to anchor that one down with our last stitch, and then we're just going to turn our garment over, and you'll see here that we've got our starting tail at the bottom and our threaded needle at the top. So to bring those two together, we're just going to thread it back through our work. So we're just going to take it all the way through, and these tails are now nicely together, and we can tie them together in a triple knot. So we're just going to snip away the excess thread and just tie together simply in a triple knot and snip away any excess ends. And this is pretty much how we're going to be tying off every single component of this design. So you'll hear me say, make sure you thread through your work and then triple knot, and that is exactly how we're going to be doing it. Okay, next we're going to look at the top part of the mushroom, and you can do this any color you like. I've liked to have tried to do this pink, but I think I'm going to stick with red. So I've just threaded onto my needle approximately a meter or a good arm pull of red yarn. And to do the outside of the mushroom, we're just going to bring our needle up, leaving a tail to tie off to, and we're just going to go in and do a back stitch. Now a back stitch is approximately 1/2 centimeter in space. If you want a little hack here, you could go around the outside of your mushroom using a ruler and mark every 1/2 centimeter, and this will then keep you nicely lined and make all your stitches nice and even. Or you can just guesstimate. It's absolutely fine. This is a wild garden, so it doesn't really matter if everything is a little bit imperfect. So to do a back stitch, we then come away from our last stitch about 1/2 centimeter, and then the stitch is then taken back into the previous stitch, and that's why it's called a back stitch. I think I've got a bit of tangling going on here, but let me just fix that up. And then we're just going to continue around the outer edge of the mushroom. And once we've reached the end and I've just popped that last back stitch in, I've got enough yarn left on my needle to do the center part. Now you can of course leave your mushroom open, you don't have to fill it in. I personally like that really thick, fuller look, so I'm going to fill all of my pieces in today. And to do that, we're just going to do a satin stitch. Now everybody does these a little bit differently. I personally like to half the piece that I'm working with. So you'll see here, I'm going to work on the right side, then I'm going to work my way to the left side. I don't know why, I just find this a lot easier to work with rather than a whole piece of trying to do a nice uniform satin stitch. So we're just going to bring our needle to the top section. You want to get it as close as you can to the top stitches, and then you're just going to, I like to just pull it down so I can see where I'm going to be putting my next stitch. And we're just going to pop it down there, and you'll see that you're now going to fill in this space with a really pretty satin stitch. Now that I've finished that half, I need to bring my needle over to the other side. So to do this, I'm just going to use my threaded needle and track it back through the work that I just made. And now I am on the other side, and we can just continue with our satin stitch just like we did before. And let's just pop that last satin stitch in. We can flip our garment over, and now we're just going to thread back through again so that these two tails are together. And then once they're together, we can just snip away any excess end, and as we always do, we tie off in a triple knot. Now to put the little dots on your mushroom, you can choose whichever colour you like. I've gone with a bit of an oatmeal here. It's just going to be a simple up and over. You just need a little bit of yarn to hold onto. So we're just going to go over in a little small little straight stitch. And I would recommend probably putting about 3 of these in. When we flip over, we just need to do a track and tie off. So we're just going to track underneath our work, bring our 2 tails together, and again, tie off in a triple knot. Now we're going to move on to our cute little bumblebee. So let's take an arm's pull length of yellow yarn and pop it on our needle. And I'm just going to bring my needle up to this point here and pull it through, and we're just going to do the bottom section of the bee. So this is again 3 little satin stitches, so make sure you're leaving a tail to tie off to later. And we're just going to bring it again, keeping it within the lines of the outline of the bee, and we're just going to pop 3 little satin stitches in here. We're then going to just take it over. We're going to pop a black line in here later, but I'm just going to do the middle section of the bumblebee, again putting a couple of satin stitches inside this part here. And then I'm just going to pop one more into this section here. And now when we flip our garment over, again, we're just going to do a track and tie off. So let's bring those two tails together by tracking underneath our work and tie them together in a triple knot. Now we're going to start with the flyaway dots for the bumblebee. So we're just going to start here, and this is obviously a very simple up and over stitch here. It's not very complicated. We're leaving our tail to tie off to. We're just going to follow the little guide dots here, and we're going to go all the way around until these little flyaway dots meet our bumblebee. Now that our flyaway dots are all finished, I've still got enough thread on my yarn to keep going, so we're just going to do the little sting in the bee's tail. So we're just going to add that to the bottom of the bee now. And then we're going to continue and do the bee's black stripes. So you can see the gaps we've got here. We're just going to pop 2 little straight stitches into this section here. And we still have enough yarn now to continue with the head of the bee. Now this section is quite large. I don't personally like the head of my bumblebee to be quite big, so I'm not going to fill all of this section in, but I have left it in case anybody likes this look. And you can also, if you wanted to, add a little white little dot to make a little eye if you wanted to sort of make your bumblebee have a little bit more character. For this project, I'm just going to do just a small little head on it because I just think it looks a little bit sweeter, but I did leave that design in just in case you wanted to create that look yourself. So now, of course, we've got our tail and we've got our threaded needle, and we're just going to do our track and tie off. And now we're going to do the little wings on the bumblebee. So we're going to add on about half an armful of white yarn, or you can use any colour you like, and we're just going to go in with a lazy daisy stitch. Now I've already done the first one here, but to do this we're just going to bring our needle up from our starting point, and then once we've done that we can pull our yarn through. We're then just going to pop our needle, we're going to move our yarn to the left first, we're going to pop our needle back through that hole we just came up from to the point where we want that wing to sit. We're going to wrap our yarn around the needle and pull through, and you'll see you create a kind of loop. Now I like to hold this with my thumb, so I'm just going to pop it on so that I can guide it exactly where I want it to go. And we're just going to hook that down with a little stitch over the top of the wing. And then when we flip our garment over, we're just going to track our needle through and tie off once our 2 tails are together. And that's your little bee done, so cute. Next we're going to move on to our butterfly. So for this you can do it any colour you like. For me I'm going to do it a pink with a darker outline with a softer pink on the inside. So I've threaded about 1 metre of pink yarn, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. We're going to go in with our back stitch, which was the stitch we used for the outer edge of the mushroom. And we're just going to do this stitch all around the outside of our butterfly's wings. And we're just going to anchor down that last little stitch, and then when we flip over again we're just going to track and tie off. Next I've added a softer pink onto my needle, approximately 1 metre, and we're just going to go in and satin stitch fill in all the spaces inside these butterfly wings. Now once you've finished filling in all of your butterfly wings, we're just going to do our track and tie off as usual. For the butterfly's body we're just going to need just a small bit of yarn. We're just going to do 3 little back stitches here and then move on to the little antennas with a back stitch. And once again we'll be doing our track and tie off as usual. Next we're going to thread on about 1/2 metre of red yarn again, and we're going to do a satin stitch for our little ladybug body. And as always, we're just going to flip over, we're just going to do a little track and tie off. Next, we're going to thread on about 1/2 meter of the black yarn, and we're just going to pop some little dots in here similar to the mushroom, but we're going to do them in black, and you probably only need about 3 for this as it's only a tiny little ladybug. We should then have enough yarn to carry on stitching and do the little head of the ladybug as well, which is only about 3 little satin stitches. And then with the remainder of the black yarn, we're just going to do the 2 little straight stitches. I think these are antennas, I'm not really sure what they're called, but we're just going to do 2 little straight stitches here. And then of course we can flip our garment over, we can do our track and tie off. And that's all of our gorgeous little insects done. Now we're going to move on to our flowers. Now you can do these any colour you like. I'm going to go for a traditional white daisy with a yellow centre. And once you know how to stitch one of these, you can do all of them as they are all the exact same. So we've just put onto our needle about a good armful of the green yarn, leaving a tail to tie off to underneath. Now we're going to go in with what looks like a back stitch, but it's actually going to be a split stitch. So we're going to go down about 1/2 centimetre again, leave that 1/2 centimetre gap, bring your needle up just like you would for a back stitch, but instead of bringing your needle into the hole of the last stitch, we're actually going to put it into the centre of the last stitch. So we're just going to pull that down now. And then again, leaving that 1/2 centimetre gap, we're going to bring our needle up, and then we're going to take that into the last stitch. So we're going to cut into, so you're almost like splitting the stitch in half. And we're just going to go all the way to the top, continuing with this method. And once we've popped our last little bit of stem in, we're just going to turn our garment over. Now we're just going to thread our needle to the halfway point of this stem. So let's just take it down. So it's probably only going to be about 3 little whip stitches here. And then we're just going to move on to our little leaves. So we're going to bring our needle to the top of the right little leaf here. And then once we pull that through, we're just going to bring our needle into the center point of that leaf. We're then going to go about 1 millimeter lower than that stitch we've just made. And we're just going to pull that through and pop our needle into the same hole as the bottom of that first leaf. And we're just going to repeat this on the other side as well, and you'll see you've created almost like a little leafy shape. And we're just going to copy that method on the other side. Now you might find that some of these flowers, the stems are a little smaller, or they're all different shapes. Some of them you can put 3 stitches in, some you might only need 1 or 2, so it depends on how big it is. This one's quite a good size and requires 3 little stitches going in there. And once that's all complete, we can then flip our garment over, and you'll see you've got your starting tail at the bottom. So we're just going to continue tracking through our work so that these 2 tails are now together, and we can tie them together in a triple knot and snip away any excess ends. So once that's complete, we're going to thread onto our needle about 1 meter of the white yarn, and we're going to start with our petals. Now each petal, all we're going to do is we're going to pull our needle from the top part, or you can do it from the bottom, it doesn't really matter, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to, and each petal is just going to have 2 straight stitches inside it. So this is a really nice, easy, beginner-friendly method. So we have lots of flowers on our Instagram and on our YouTube. So if you prefer a different flower look, then you can definitely head to our YouTube tutorials and learn how to do some other styles as well. But this is a really beginner-friendly version, and it also actually looks really, really nice when it's done as well. You can obviously do these in all sorts of different colors. For me, I just really love the traditional white daisy with the yellow center. So once we've stitched our last little petal, we're just going to flip our garment over, and then of course you'll have 2 tails there to tie off together. We might need to track maybe once and just snip away any excess ends. Next, I'm going to thread onto my needle approximately 1/2 meter of yellow yarn, and this is going to be for the center of our daisy. And we're just going to go in and do our satin stitch again, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. So we're just going to pop about probably 5 or 6 little satin stitches in here to fill in this middle section. Once we're finished, of course, we're just going to do our track and tie off. And this is pretty much how you're going to do all of your flowers for this project. And it's going to look like a gorgeous little wildflower garden. It's a really, really fun one to make. I absolutely love this design. And that's your daisy complete. So you can now use this method to complete the other 5 or 6 flowers, and just make sure everything is nicely tied off nice and tight. Now once you have finished your project and you want to remove your sulky stick and stitch, you're just going to submerge it into some water. Now you can run your garment underneath the tap, or you can actually turn it inside out and put it on a very delicate cold wash. It's entirely up to you. You can use this method where you just submerge it into some water and just let it peel away. You might need to aggravate it a little bit with your hands, but once it all is removed, you can just flat lay to dry, and then you are finished. And then once it's all dry, you have made your gorgeous little wildflower garden. I really hope you enjoyed this project. Happy stitching, guys.